All right, so now we're going to talk about the two main types of motivation. So we've talked about some theories as to why we're motivated to do the things we do, but there are many different kinds of motivations, and they can kind of be boiled down in these two main categories. So, intrinsic motivation is driven by inherent pleasure of doing the behavior. You are motivated to do that behavior because you just simply enjoy doing it. Maybe you Googled that fact because you were just simply curious. Maybe you took that class because you're just simply interested in that topic. Um, and you just completed that project just because you wanted to. You wanted to feel that sense of achievement. There wasn't anything in it for you. You just liked to do it. Another example of this could be doing a cartwheel. Why do people do cartwheels? Except professional gymnasts, people have nothing to gain out of doing a cartwheel. So, could it just be because they find it inherently fun? They just enjoy doing cartwheels. Extrinsic motivation is the opposite. This is motivation that's driven by external consequences, including rewards and punishment. So this is motivation from money, from grades. So maybe you're studying just because you want that grade, not because you actually like the class. Or maybe you're doing your chores just to get the praise and not to get the house clean because you like a clean house. Stuff like that. So an example of an extrinsic motivation would be working a mundane job that you really don't like. It's not going to advance your career. You don't enjoy the day-to-day. It's not something you want for the rest of your life. You're not intending to work it for the rest of your life. So why are you doing it? It's definitely not intrinsic motivation. You don't have inherent pleasure for doing it. But there's this thing called a paycheck, which is an extrinsic motivation. You keep at that job because of that motivation of money, which you need for rent and bills. So, why do you go to work? It could be either extrinsic or intrinsic. So maybe you genuinely like what you do for work. I hope you do, or I at least hope you find a job where you genuinely like what you do. And this would be intrinsic motivation. You actually want to do the work that is being done. Or maybe it's extrinsic motivation and you're just at that job because it pays the bills. It pays your rent, it gives you money for food, etc. Why do you play on a sports team? Is it because you actually genuinely enjoy playing basketball, for example? You really like the thrill of a sport? Or maybe you get paid for it, and that's why you play it now. Maybe it started with intrinsic value, but now it's all about the money, baby. Why are you in college? Is it because you genuinely want to learn about your area of interest? Are you here because you really want to know more about the field that you're going into? Or is it so that you can find a good job later in life? Intrinsic, extrinsic. So you can have intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for the same behavior. But can they interact with each other? Can the extrinsic factors influence those intrinsic factors? So they've actually done studies about this. And they did this study about giving gold stars to children. So what they did is that they had preschool children and these children were given the opportunity to play with markers. The amount they played was their level of intrinsic motivation. That's how they measured intrinsic motivation, is how much they wanted to play, how long they played with them, because of their enjoyment. But there are 3 groups that they experimentally manipulated. The first group didn't have any reward at all. This is their control group. They were just asked to play. They're just like, here's some markers, have some fun, go play. Then there's an expected reward group that told they would get gold stars, ribbon, and a certificate for playing with the markers. And then there was a third group called unexpected reward that was like the no reward. They just got asked to play. They weren't told about the rewards, but at the end they got the reward. And it's important to note that before they tested these groups, before they asked them to play and told them about the rewards, all of the children were equal on their intrinsic motivation. So they measured the amount of time they were playing with these markers beforehand, and it averaged out among these 3 groups. And so what they found is that there was a lot of playing in the no reward group and the unexpected reward group. They didn't know that they were getting that extrinsic reward. They were just doing it because they wanted to. But then, the group that knew that they were getting an extrinsic reward had way less playing with those markers. It affected their intrinsic motivation. Why? Why did this happen? That's kind of weird. Well, it's because rewards can undermine intrinsic motives. But it's important to know that it's not always the case. It's about how you go about it. So the cognitive evaluation theory is a big theory about why and how this happens. And what it says is that intrinsic motivation is really driven by this psychological need for autonomy and competence. So why you have intrinsic motivation is because you want to be independent and in control, and you want to feel like you are competent and have the abilities to do what you want to do. So then it goes further and it says, if extrinsic motivation removes that need for autonomy or competence, motivation will be decreased. But if the extrinsic rewards make that person still be able to feel competent and in control, then their motivation actually increases. It actually helps that intrinsic motivation. So it's all about how you go about that extrinsic reward. So when does this happen? When does motivation decrease? And when does it increase? When an extrinsic reward is given. So if you have intrinsic motivation, it'll decrease if an extrinsic reward, such as like praise or positive feedback of like, you're doing a good job, is given to you regardless of how well you're doing. So it doesn't matter how well you're doing at whatever you're doing, you're going to get praised. And also, if you have requirements about the amount of work you need to do, that's also going to decrease motivation. Because this one, the regardless of how well you do, removes that feeling of competence. You don't have to do, it doesn't matter how well you do anymore. And then the quantity, making a requirement of how much to do, removes that autonomy, that feeling of control. So, to increase motivation, You can have praise that's informational feedback based on how well you are completing the task. So if you are completing the task well, that praise should reflect that. You should give them information about, oh wow, you were stacking those blocks so neatly, good job, or being honest with them. And then not requiring a quantity of work to do, but rewarding a certain quality of work for the reward. So this can actually drive competence and make it a little bit competitive. Competition drives motivation. And then this one here, the informational feedback, gives them a sense of control. They know what to focus on, and they know how competent they are being. So both the quality of work and the information-based feedback help their levels of control and their idea of competency. So how do we apply this? How can we apply this to our everyday lives? Well, it's really easy to apply this to our jobs. In fact, that's an entire area of psychology called industrial organizational psychology, or IO psychology. They use these psychological theories to evaluate and improve workplaces. This is their whole job, is that they try to motivate workers and improve productivity. So it tries to maximize the combination of worker satisfaction, making the workers happy, and worker productivity, getting the job done, so the management's happy. So what's interesting about this is employee satisfaction is directly related to the employee's productivity and motivation. When an employee is happier and feeling more appreciated, they are more motivated to get the work done, and they're more productive. And what's interesting is the biggest factor for employee satisfaction is the employee's perception of management. Specifically, how management cares for their employees and respects their employees. Are they honest with their employees? So there are several things that improve employee satisfaction. These are the top 5. And you'll notice that the first 3 are all about management. So management listens to employees. Management doesn't hover. They don't micromanage their employees. They're not always looking over their shoulder. They trust their employees. And then management respects their employees. They treat them like human beings. And then there's the competitive benefits and perks. So this is kind of going into that improving motivation through rewarding quality of work rather than quantity. So maybe you get a bonus at your job because you made a giant sale. You did really, really well that quarter. You get the bonus based on how well you did rather than how long you've been there or how much work you've done, regardless of what you did. And then room for flexibility and creativity. This really allows for autonomy. This allows for that feeling of control for workers. This lets them be able to come up with new ideas and think that they have some control in their lives and order. And isn't that one of Maslow's main needs, is that you want to have control and order in your life? So if you don't have that, you won't be satisfied. And this is a graph from a research article that looked at employees when they have choice in when, where, and how to work. versus employees without choice. So they measured their innovation. So are they coming up with new ideas while they're working? How well they're doing at their job, how happy they are at their job, and how happy they are in the environment that they're working in. And overall, all of the employees that have the choice of when, where, and how to work are all happier among all of these things.